a lot of nights. Yes, that's right. So my name is Georg Henzler. I work for Cognizant Netcentric as a solution architect. And I had a fun project this year. We had to move a bit of data. It was a bit of weekend work. And yeah, it reminded me a bit of a talk I gave some 6 years ago, I think, about how to break AEM. We didn't break AEM in the end. So that was good. And we have a double feature. Let's see how much time I'll have left for that. But we also had AEM, the new dynamic media with OpenAPI capabilities. What a name. So we had it enabled for our project, and we are successfully using it. And I can talk a bit through you what this brings of new features. But let's get to it. So basically from B to A, not from A to B, B to A. So B is Bestand for the German ones, or legacy. The old system, custom built, not based on a product. A lot of complexity they built over the years into asset distributions and channels and like all these things. Turned out 40 terabytes of data. We asked a bit too late actually on how much data in the system actually is. We should have asked a bit earlier, but we found out it had. More than 50% videos, which is uncommon actually, because lots of customers, they use more YouTube or Vimeo or other channels. But that system had a lot of videos in it because it was initially created for videos. And it was 10 years old, aged system, technical debt. We all know technical debt, but there's also product debt. You know, like if you create your own product, there's also you gather some decisions, like good decisions, but also not so great decisions, and the product manager we were also closely in contact with, he totally agreed to that he would have done some things differently. The user experience was a bit outdated. The data quality was not always perfect, but I mean, what is perfect in the world? But all in all, they had a working system, but they decided to move away. Maybe an interesting point is that purpose-built platforms, they age quicker because it's just, you know, like, I mean, you have the budget to actually build it tailored if you purpose build it, and then you make all these decisions, and it's harder to say no. While a product company like Adobe, they do often say no, this is not part of the product, and that's also a good thing, because otherwise it gets too complex, not manageable, all these things. But let's talk about my favorite product, AEM, or AEM assets in this case. There's just a lot of base functionality you don't have to worry about. I mean, that uploading of large assets just works. If you have a custom-built system, you might run into a problem after upgrade. Like, you don't have to worry about that for AEM. And it's just good UIs. It's well tested. It's rolled out at scale. So a lot of base stuff just works really well. And what's also nice, and that hasn't always been the case, I mean, videos have always worked, but it has been some effort to get it work on premise. In the cloud service, it really works nicely. And yeah, and we were part of a VIP program for this particular customer, so for this Polaris part, so that was also interesting. And good, I get to that later. So quickly, what was there? Obviously, asset management is on the left, so the general system to manage assets, but they had also like digital signage and in-store video players. They had a media portal for the press to download things, to use it in press really articles, and asset distribution mostly for agencies to download and use it in print, web, whatever. And then, like, their solution as they had it was like all a custom solution. Like, this media portal is like an own custom solution, and everything else was a big custom solution. And where we got to is like the new architecture. So basically, AEM assets, we used ACS Commons to distribute. We hooked up to this to the existing media portal, so this custom solution that stayed. And for this whole digital signage and in-store video players, there was a new custom solution built, not based on AEM screens. For other reasons, we weren't involved. So a bit technically, what do we do? So to actually make these integrations happen, the easiest is obviously Sling distribution, because that is what we all know, and that's how the replication works in the cloud. For the other two systems, we used eventing, which is nice, with Adobe I/O webhooks, and then those systems, like on the events when they came, they called back to AEM, or they are today calling back to AEM assets to retrieve whatever they need. There's a Delta. So what did we have to change? Like almost everything. Like the only thing that the custom solution, this media portal, that stayed, but even the integration to that obviously was also rebuilt. So it's also nice. You can do a lot of things nice and new and fresh and maybe better, but to migrate them in parallel, it's obviously not an easy task. It was even different teams, companies that did the migration, which also makes it hard. And we wanted to avoid double maintenance and freeze periods. So like, double upload to two systems, to the old and new one, that is obviously not a good thing. Freeze period is another solution. We also didn't want to have that. And also a side note, so actually to validate or to test 40 terabyte of data that everything is migrated, it's not an easy task. So basically, the validation was in production that no one complained. Like we did some validation, but we didn't look at all assets individually if they were correctly migrated. Technically, we had a REST API, which is a bit uncommon for moving large amounts of data, and like the binaries were CDN download URLs. Obviously, we needed to optimize for speed and throughput because with so much data. And then like migration code is always throwaway code. So it's not like we wanted to make it as easy as possible. We wanted to get it through the door. We wanted to use existing framework and tooling as much as possible. And Adobe has the answer. So there is the bulk import that you can set up. That works well, but not for us because we just had this REST API, so we just didn't happen to have it in S3 buckets. We had also, we needed some flexibility on mapping of metadata because they wanted some changes. They wanted to use the opportunity, like now that they migrated all the stuff. So yeah, it didn't work. Then also, like the obvious thing, there is Asset Manager Create Asset, happens to be deprecated in the cloud. So yeah, so what's the alternative? Yeah, we'll see that in a bit. Then Adobe I/O, we use this for like this other piece in the architecture already, but like we didn't really want to build a UI there because like that is work, and later on you just throw it away. Also, obviously, you could do. I mean, with AWS Azure, you have a lot of possibilities to like this scales well, and you can do nice stuff. But just also, we would have to build a UI and organization. No, they just didn't have it at hand. Like obviously it was a big enterprise. They would have had it somewhere, but they would have had to talk to people and agree on cost and like all these things. And that was all for just like then later on throw away the code. So we didn't do that. We wanted to stay pure Adobe. So what did we do? Obviously, first thing, aggressively challenge what actually needs to be migrated to somehow get down this amount of data. And the delta migrations to avoid the freeze periods. So we could, like, we had just like this from the old system to the new system. We ran this nightly, and we could avoid the content freeze. And we could just like basically the authors kept using the old system, and the connecting systems could already connect to the new system because like a day later, the latest, they would have all the up-to-date assets there. And the idea was, yeah, let's use managed control processes to not have to write a custom UI, and Adobe I/O for ingestion. And we had a separate, so that's always important, I think, separate delta check for the asset binary versus the metadata. So the metadata could change and be updated, but we didn't always have to replace the binary. So Adobe I/O, yes, we wanted to use it. There is some limitations there, which we found out quickly. So sync actions 60 seconds and async actions 1 hour max runtime. So that made it a bit more complicated. Also something that's a bit unrelated, but I think that should be added at some point in the cloud service. You can just change an environment and everything restarts environment variables, while in Adobe I/O and App Builder, this is always connected to a deployment. So you always have to, like, you can do it in GitHub Actions and so on, but you always replace the code as well, which actually I didn't want to do. But it still worked. Maybe quickly, so like a very simple migration flow. So we have the author on the left, we have the legacy on the system on the right, and obviously we had this REST API, so we got a list of like all the things that we wanted to migrate. We had some filtering in place, and then like this, what is deprecated is you just run asset manager create asset, and you spool the response. This is easy, right? But it's deprecated. So what we did is this. This is not easy, but it's not deprecated, which is a good thing. And in the end, it just like it's like the important bits here is first of all, like I mean this. The thing is with the runtime, so like up to 20 minutes, one asset took to actually spool over, so we couldn't do it synchronously. So this is why it's needed a transfer control, which was just polling for it to finish, and then there was this async that can run for an hour, and the maximum was, I think, 20 minutes, so that was fine. So you keep polling here, and but actually the transfer function needs to initiate this request, so to tell AEM that something is coming, and then you get put URLs. And then you actually the range requests are important. So you get the data from like partial data from the CDN, and then you spool it bit by bit with all these put URLs, and then you complete it. If you run it in the browser, you have a JavaScript library to make this simpler. Somehow in Adobe I we just did the requests and it worked. But yes, so comparing to this, it's not deprecated, but more complex. Numbers. Obviously, when I heard, 40 terabytes, maybe we should look into how this possibly can work. So I just took an asset that was 708 megabyte, and I just did a local AEM ingestion, just checking. And I mean, this is really just to show you, I did some Excel comparison. But in the end, like I got to, okay, 63 days is probably not a good idea. Something needs to be different, but that was local on a bad connection. So somewhere in the cloud on a better connection, I got it down to 7 days. And obviously, so this is the data, and I just interpolated it up to the 40 terabytes. And in the end, then for the Adobe I/O, it's actually not that much quicker, because one of the reasons that it's deprecated is that you shouldn't spool the data through the VM. And it's so I thought, like I hoped for, I don't know, I hoped for 1 day, but it was 5 days, still okay. And then obviously what we did, this is the important point, the 40 terabytes is we needed to slim that down. So so actually with the filtering, and also this filtering changed a bit during the course of the project, so it was very good to have this delta approach, because we learned while we were going. It was like at the bottom is like 3 months we had it running. So we learned as we were going, and we had also the filtering a bit changed. And in the end, it was like the 23 terabyte, and we ended up at a transfer speed, and we ran this highly in parallel with 100 megabyte per sec. And then so we got it running in 1 week, like for the whole chunk, and then we had delta upgrades, and we got the new assets that came in every day. So that was just a few, and that worked fine. So usually, like the nightly runs were just 3 hours. So the title of this talk is a bit wrong, I have to admit, because actually we didn't do it what the title says. Maybe some trivia, like biggest asset, almost 60 gigabyte, 611 put URLs it used, and the longest we had some estimation that we had something wrong at some point, and then we just interpolated it to all assets, and then it would have taken like 30 to 40 weeks, which we had then a call with Adobe about it, and we could find a solution, which was great. MCP, so it's not marked, though, managed control processes. It's not actually marked as deprecated in ACS Commons, but it has some problems. It has state, memory, and like the author runs in a cluster, and like most of the time it works somehow fine, but you get into a problem, especially if the processes run longer than, I don't know, like 2, 5, 10 hours, because then potentially a pod restarts and you don't have it under control when these pod restart, and then it's just gone and it's somehow stuck and you don't get it. Also the reports, how it's saved, it uses 1 node per row. That is just slow to iterate, and then you have like a default timeout for requests in the cloud service, so you get like a service outage when it's really just a long request. So that doesn't work well. Excel download was generated on the fly and always ran into this timeout, but we could find a solution for that. So for the second point, so that was interesting, and for a long time I always wanted to know, so like when you have tabular data, how can you save it in the JCR? And the obviously conceptually nice way and also correct way for the correct way for pages, and we all know is obviously you have like just a hierarchical structure, that's how you do it. But for this very case, it is not that great. Then like something like just using a CSV file, this is not jackrabbit at all, but well, it's a file and it works. Then you can have something fancy like one property per row. Like, it sounds a bit weird, but like I just tried it. And then you can have a string array. And you also see here, we retrieved all this data with metadata. So our execution plan was a CSV file with a long JSON column at the very end, which had all these data, the metadata that we then used to actually apply it when it ran. So yeah, so I did some tests because I like tests. And it's important to note, so we have exponential scales on both sides. So it should, in theory, because they're both exponential, it should be linear lines if it's linearly scaling. And just the comparison, so CSV file is actually pretty good, but surprisingly, the string array property is better. And so this goes to 1 million items, which we didn't have. We had around 80,000. So we were somewhere in this spot. So we were between 1/10 second for CSV or the string array. And like we had the problem with this 1 node per row, because this goes pretty much up to, yeah, too long. You don't want to wait that long. And then this awkward 1 property per row. Like if you want to read this, you'll have to download the PDF. So that's for later. So yeah, the thing is, like in theory, the string array property would be the best, but bummer, in MongoDB, you have a restriction on document size, so actually this runs well locally, but not in the cloud. So in the end, CSV file, that was my gut feeling anyway, that was what we were using. Exactly, so that's what we did, explained this, also this part. We ran parallel execution just with the executor service, like 16 threads, usually could tweak it, usually 60 threads in parallel. We needed to deal with topology changes, so deactivate. So basically, we had a pause marker, and we deactivated on the activation of the SCR component. We just saved the CSV file, which is totally fine. I think like you have some minutes. Like it should obviously be as quick as possible, but saving the CSV file was totally fine for the use case. The problem is to start it again. You can't just use activate, because then it all of a sudden starts to run on multiple nodes. So like Sling scheduler with running on leader only is something that worked well. And to get the UI updated, so obviously this is not good for performance and for many users, but for a few admin users that sometimes check, so you just don't save anything in memory. So you just always load the CSV file whenever whenever the admin comes to look where it actually is after some days. So that's the solution that worked. And yeah, so I'm through with this already. Looking at the time, perfect. So with that, I come to dynamic media, because we had it enabled. And we were part of this VIP program. It was also very good collaboration with Adobe to get also things for the customer fixed that we needed. For example, to make renditions available. That was something that we asked for, and they implemented. The thing was called Polaris at some point, and this is like really an old slide. So it is really about connecting assets, like making them available to other systems, and then it's the delivery, and then it's also analytics. Let's look at it. So so in the very short version, like what is it really for a technician? And it's actually very simple. It's a brilliant, simple concept that I really like. So you have the author, and you have the stamp status property, which some projects maybe had in some form or another anyway, and but now this is really fixed, so it needs to be called exactly that. And you set it to approved, and then it gets into this delivery tier. The delivery tier being just same as author, just delivery. We know from the cloud, so you have author publish, we have preview, I believe, and now there's also delivery. You can, for that, also have custom domains if you want it. It's not in the UI yet, but you can get it via support. And then you have an asset selector you can use in any application in your enterprise landscape in whatever system. And you can, like the actual URLs to the assets, you can use without authentication, so they are public. But like this whole search and retrieving or like authoring admin functionality, that is something that you need to be authenticated for. The asset usage is tracked. So this is what we also saw. And that is nice because you don't need analytics or anything for that. So it is just like, because it's now from one single source, it's just tracked from where it came. The details. So very important, non-enumeratable. So we always had a bit the problem with the paths, and depending on, like you have the path, and then you have maybe, I don't know, like campaign -1.jpg, and then someone could say, there's probably a 2.jpg, and then it works, and that's what you didn't want. So this is just UUID based. It's non-enumeratable. It is SEO friendly for the last bit here. You have access to renditions. I mean, the API is in the references. You have image format conversions. You can smart crop. You have the default player based on video.js, so you can just replace this bit here with play, and then you get a player. And there's a search API with authentication, as I just said, so you can hook it up anywhere just to enable people to produce those URLs that are then public. And you can also, like, by default, those are public, but you can make them non-public behind authentication with a special property that is DAM roles. And it's different from the JCR that is folder-based, and it's almost like Roland Gruber's talk and his problem. Like in assets, you often have like a per asset, and here the concept is also exactly that. It is, you have a DAM roles property, and per asset, you decide who can see it, and it's basically IMS group IDs that you put in here. But this is what you put in JCR, so, and you can set it by some technical process, or you could also make it for the author selectable. Comparing a bit to these other things that are around. So first of all, connected assets has been problematic mostly for the reason that it synchronized and copies assets to like another system, like AEM site. So you have the copies, and if the license runs out, then you need to check in different places, and also analytics, everything gets harder. It's not so great, and the funny thing is it's even not supported together with Dynamic Media Classic, so officially you can't use it together. So yeah, but that's the old world, so I think you don't need to think about that anymore, luckily. Dynamic Media Classic has some good sides, obviously, because not everything, like the new API doesn't support everything that Dynamic Media Classic supports, like most notably templates, for example, they don't work yet. So and with Dynamic Media Classic, I think it works well, but it's just like you sometimes feel it's like an outdated technology stack. It has been around for forever. So it's good that there is change coming. But yeah, smart imaging, custom thumbnails, smart crop for video. So yeah, we had some things like, and actually for thumbnails, we had funny stories because this particular customer, in their marketing language they used, in the videos, they often started black, which is really nice because they quickly become non-black. But the problem is, like, the thumbnail is black if they. And actually, that was part of discussion, and it's coming. So, like, Adobe is working on the missing feature, so it's great. Like, nothing to complain. Wishlist. Yeah, so we do have some things now. This is like really more item-based and path-based. When you use this search API, you really have the problem that you can't, like, often you have like a top-level path element. Maybe it's a brand or a department or something. The typical things that you have by default, you don't have it in the Sage search API because it's not, the information is not there. What you can do then is, like, you have like a property you set yourself to the metadata based on a listener in AEM, and by that way it somehow becomes available as a property to the search API. But in a way, you don't want to do this manually. This should be part of the product. It's that is something. And also we noticed, like, some of the asset metadata was not available. You, like, some, for example, for videos, just like like simple things like the length. So some things were just not available we didn't understand the reasons, but this is also being worked on, I believe. The custom thumbnails, I just gave an example why this was a problem. We also understood, like, the reporting is coming, like some customers are using it already, but we understand it's not including geolocation yet, so we also, like, asked for that. So hopefully that's also coming sometime next year. Because that's obviously important also for licensing reasons. So you have, like, some assets that you got from an agency, you have some license terms, and maybe it's not allowed to be used in the US. And without this reporting functionality, you can't actually prove that nobody in the US has used it. So that's the thing. And yeah, I actually like the asset selector micro frontend that works really well. That is actually a nice concept and modern good concept to just be able to plug it in anywhere. At the moment, you always have to log in, so it would be nice if that would just, like supposedly there are some ways, but it's would be nice if it would be officially supported to just be able to use a technical user, because often you have like some, let's say, system XYZ, and you want to use this asset selector there in a admin functionality, and then you could just give it a technical user for the system, because like this system may use exactly these assets. Good conclusion. So yeah, overall the customer is happy because they did really feel they got a mature base platform, so that was great. They were happy. Even like obviously all projects we had some problems on the way, and like not everything was working, but all in all it worked really well for them. The delta migration approach, everyone was quite happy, like something that we proactively actually suggested. They were a bit like, yeah, we just assume there will be a freeze period, or maybe we will have to upload the assets twice. They were just really happy that they didn't have to worry about that, so that was good. And what I also saw, like it's really good, like how AEM Assets meanwhile works with videos like Dash, HLS, like all these things. Like I remember we had this discussion if we even need the rendition, and you get this player via the dynamic media URL, and it was like this 5 GB video, and I was like, yeah, no, well, probably this is not the right thing for on mobile. But then I just because then there's no problem, just test it, and I did test it, and it is just really not a problem. So most of you noticed, like I wasn't that sure, but today I can say totally fine to use these approaches, and you don't really need the renditions that much anymore. And yeah, it has some limitations, but overall I can just say like it's a cool product, and I like that the right architectural choices are made, so well-documented APIs, and also not copying assets around. So that's what I love about it. So yeah, that's it already. We have some references, and that's you can read up later. But that's it already, and I'm even finishing a bit early, so we have time for questions.
Thank you, Georg. Yeah, running such big migrations, adding so many files to assets. This also executes a number of workflows. So did you face any challenging with the running workflows?
No.
Because there weren't any.
Yeah, the long answer is so first of all, we have a very pragmatic setup there. They didn't want to have long, complicated approval workflows, all that, and also like this. I mean, the default workflow is really you upload, and in the cloud you have this asset crunching happening, offloaded, and so yeah, it just worked. I mean, the one workflow problem was probably this when we did it wrong, and it would have been like 30 to 40 weeks to migrate it, but we found a solution.
Excellent. Did you consider to first move assets into any storage supported by Adobe bulk import as a middle step, and actually, then use the bulk import?
Actually, yes, that was a discussion, because it was actually somewhere in AWS. I think it was in a different region. It had other problems because we would have disconnected. Because what we did have with this approach, also with this complicated slide of like this Adobe I/O and going back and forth, but what we had an atomic operation for one asset. And once you start like really just like moving the binaries, then you have this large process that somehow moves binaries from A to B, and then you have like some other process that updates metadata, and that has some other complexity to it. So that helped us keeping it meanly, maybe.
Meanly, excellent. Do you share the solution on GitHub? Could be interesting to others.
Yes, there is the plan. Like, yeah, it's a bit back and forth. It's actually, I think, the best way forward is actually to improve managed control processes to make that happen. Because, like, I did have the idea to provide some source code on how to do it, but it should really be in managed control processes, and that just hasn't happened yet. But I try.
Excellent. Thanks for having us, Georg. Big applause.